So today we're going to talk about slope-intercept form. We have discussed this before, so we started going through this when we were doing the data unit. I did specific videos covering it, but I wanted to go into a little bit more detail because I know some people are still struggling a little bit with it. So if you're not struggling, this homework will be super easy for you. If you are, please watch, go through the examples, and then we're going to do a little mini quiz over it tomorrow just to make sure everybody's got it. And then we'll do some more activities going forward just so we can make sure everyone is on the right page when it comes to slope-intercept form, because this is something you're going to use for quite a while. You'll see it a lot in algebra, and I want to make sure everybody understands it. So if you look at your notes that are in front of you, the first page says slope-intercept form part 1. There is a back to this, so we'll get to that in just a minute. So, slope-intercept form, the y-intercept of a graph is the value of y where the line intercepts the y-axis. Intercepts the y-axis. The y-intercept is also the value of y when x equals 0. So when x is 0, the y is your y-intercept, because when you graph it, that's where it would go. So, the next part, in a graph of a horizontal line, the y value is constant. So that doesn't change when it's a horizontal line. That's just a flat line where the slope equals 0. Therefore, equations of horizontal lines will always begin with y equals. That's why we go into y equals mx plus b. All right. In the graph of a vertical line, the x is constant. That's when you have your vertical line, like we discussed in class. Sorry, it's not looking very vertical on my camera. Vertical line. Therefore, equations of vertical lines will always begin with x equals. So if x equals 3, then you know it's a vertical line on the 3 when you're graphing it. If y equals 3, you know it's a horizontal line. Sorry, I can't get my angles right. Horizontal line on the y-axis at 3, which is the y-intercept. All right, so let's go through and do a couple of these together. If you want to pause the video now so you can try these on your own and see if you've got it, now would be a good time. All right, a line has a slope of -9 and a y-intercept of 2. What is the equation of the line in slope-intercept form? They've already written it just like I told you to start. Y equals something x plus something. Well, right here they gave us the slope was -9, so y equals -9x plus a y-intercept of 2, so plus 2. That's all you're doing in this first one. All right, so the next one, a line has a slope of 4.5 and a y-intercept of -10. What is the equation of the line in slope-intercept form? So just like I showed you, you're going to write y equals something x plus something. They've given you the slope. It's 4.5, and the y-intercept is -10. So write y equals 4.5x plus -10. You can also write y equals 4.5x minus 10. Either one would be correct. All right, a line has a slope of -5 and passes through the origin. What is the equation of the line in slope-intercept form? So think about that for a minute. It passes through the origin. What would the equation of the line be? It's going to be y equals -5x, because they've given us the slope, and if it passes through the origin, it's plus 0. So it's already going through the origin. Remember, if you have a graph, let me make sure y'all can see this. If you have a graph and it passes through the origin, what is the y-intercept? That's correct. It's 0. Okay, so when we look at the next row of problems that are down here, it's giving you the full equation. You have to tell me the slope and the y-intercept and then do a general draft of what the line would look like. You don't need to number all the spots. I just need to know generally that you've got it, whether or not it's a positive slope or a negative slope, and in the general direction of where the y-intercept is. So this first one, y equals negative 5x plus 7. The slope is negative 5. The y-intercept is 7. So the y-intercept will be somewhere up here, and it's negative 5, so it's a negative slope. So your line should look like this. Make sense? So I want you to go ahead and do number 5 and 6 on your own and see how you do with those. Just a general thing. Don't spend a lot of time going through. I need to know whether or not you understand that it's a vertical line, a horizontal line, a positive slope, a negative slope, etc. So go ahead and try those, and we'll go over those tomorrow. All right. And then when we look at the next page, so if you're going through those, you can pause. And if you're ready to move on, now we will go to the next page. So, Slope-Intercept Form, Part 2. This just gets us into solving some of the problems with the same stuff. So, Luke's family goes to the movie and purchases a large popcorn. They're debating whether or not to purchase any drinks. The table below shows how much money they'll spend based on the number of drinks they decide to purchase. So, you're going to go through and find the slope of the line. Then you're going to find the y-intercept represented in the table and tell me why. And then you're going to write the equation in slope-intercept form. So I'm going to pause, see if this is something you're able to do on your own. Look at the table, and then we'll go through it together. So go ahead and pause the video and try that now. Okay, so basically the first thing we're going to do is I've got ordered pairs by looking at this table, right? So I'm going to use the slope formula, which was y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 to get my slope. So in this case, these are the x's and these are the y's. So we're going to go with, let's call this y2 and this y1, and this will be x2 and x1. So y1, y2, x1, x2. All right. So our y2 goes on the top. So this is 10 minus 625 over our x2 minus our x1, 1 minus 0. So this equals 375 over 1, which is the same thing as 375. So our slope is 3.75. What is our y-intercept here? Look at it and tell me if you can figure out the y-intercept. So when this x is 0, the y is 625. So the y-intercept is right there for you, 6.25. This is where x equals 0. So what is the slope-intercept form of this line? What's the equation for this line? It would be y equals 3.75x plus, I'm running out of room here, 6.25. Does everybody understand how we got there? All right. So you're going to look at the next one. I want you to try this on your own. I want you to think through the slope and rate of change in this situation. Explain why you got that. Then I need you to go through and find the y-intercept and explain why that's the y-intercept, and then write an equation for this line in slope-intercept form. So try that one, pause the video. So in this one about Carly, she wants to buy some fish to keep in her room. So the local pet store will charge her $12.50 for a fish tank and then 20 cents for each fish they purchase. So the set cost is $12.50 no matter how many fish she has. The cost will only increase when she buys additional fish. So the slope, or the rate of change, the part that's changing as this line is drawn, is based on the number of fish. So at one fish, she's going to pay 20 cents. So that becomes our slope or rate of change. It's the only thing that's going to change based on her decision. Then when we look at the y-intercept, it's $12.50 because she has to pay $12.50 for the fish tank no matter what. That's where her cost starts. So the equation to represent this situation in slope-intercept form is y equals 0.2. I really should have left the other 0 off because it doesn't make any sense to have it there. So 0.2x plus 1250. So then let's look at the next one. Betty's Bakery uses a chocolate chip cookie recipe that calls for a certain ratio of brown sugar to butter, as shown in the graph. So what is the slope of this graph, and what does that mean? And what is the y-intercept, and what does that represent? And then you're going to write the equation in slope-intercept form. So I want you to try this one on your own. So pause the video and work on this one. Then when you look at the back of your notes, you'll see there are some more questions here. This is actually showing it in ways other than a graph. So in these cases, you have tables. Remember, those are the same as ordered pairs. So it's telling you right here that when x equals -5, y equals -25. That's the same thing as saying there's a point at -5, -25. So I want you to use your slope formula where you do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 to find the slope. I want you to find the y-intercept. That's when x equals 0. The y would be your y-intercept. And then I want you to write the equation for me. So I want you to try those on these 4. Let's do the first one together. So in the first one, I'm going to call this my y1 and x1 and x2, and I'm going to call this my y1 and y2. So let's go ahead and look at these, because these are both y's. Those go on top. So y2, I use this space up here, y2 is 12.25 minus y1, which is 6. We're just looking at the difference or change between those two. And then my x2 is 5, and my x1 is 0. So when I actually do the math on that, I'm going to get the difference. Go ahead and figure it out and then write it down. Yes, it is 6.25 over 5. So that is actually going to be our slope. So can I simplify 6.25 divided by 5? I sure can. If I divide 6.25 by 5, I'm going to get 1.25. So our slope is 1.25. So right here for the m, I'm going to write 1.25. For the b, that's the y-intercept. Well, I'm going to look for where the x equals 0, and it's right here, so my y-intercept is 6. Y-intercept is 6. So the equation will be y equals 1.25x plus 6, the equation for this line. So I want you to try the same thing on numbers 5, 6, and 7 and see if you can figure those out. And then you can pause the video while you work on those, and when you come back, we will talk about writing the equation based on word problems. So go ahead and pause the video and then restart when you're ready. All right, so now we're going to get into word problems. This looks a little more difficult, but remember, anything that's changing in the equation is your slope, and your y-intercept is your starting point. Just remember that as you're going through these. So Danny is diving for rings at the bottom of the pool and is 8.7 feet below the surface of the water. He grabs a ring and ascends 13 feet per second. Write an equation to represent the relationship between x, the number of seconds, and y, the number of feet below the surface of the water. So you know he's always starting at 8.7 feet. And you know he's ascending or going up, because remember ascending means rising, 1.3 feet per second. So that's what's changing in this, because it tells you it's per second. The standard static item in this word problem, the part that doesn't change, is that he always starts at 8.7 feet below the surface. The part that doesn't change is going to be your y-intercept, and the part that is changing becomes your slope, because that will depend on the number of seconds they ask you. So y equals, which part is changing? 1.3 feet per second. It's already told you, right? So 1.3x being the number of seconds, plus 8.7 feet below the surface. 8.7 feet below the surface. Now, remember, he's going up, he's ascending, and this tells you he's below the surface. So do you think that's positive or negative? It would be negative. So negative 8.7 8.7 because he starts 8.7 feet down. So I would probably rewrite this just to be safe. Y equals 1.3x minus 8.7. And that way I would have my final answer right there. So you're going to do problems 9 and 10 on your own, and we will check those tomorrow. So you have a total of 5 problems to do on your own, and the others we have done together. Have a great evening.